This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video I'm going to take a look at some of my currently inked pens. Now, in my previously currently inked video, I realized when I finished the video that I had forgotten to include my TWSBI Mini that I had inked up with Sailor Ink Studio 143, but I've enjoyed using this pen and ink combination because of the way they look together and the way they look with the notebook that I'm using it with. They seem to be a perfect match, but using this pen with this ink has been a slight disappointment, or just not the ideal writing experience. I've noticed that every time I begin using the pen, it's a little bit dry, and so I'll have to prime the feed just a little bit. And in fact, as I've used it more and more, it's just become a habit. Before I even start writing with it for the first time, I'll prime the feed just a little bit, and it's a decent writing experience, but it's just not my favorite. So I guess this pen and ink combination isn't the perfect pairing, but as I've thought about it, in a sense it's a okay pairing for someone who has been using fountain pens long enough to know that if you just prime the feed, with this being a piston filler, I can prime the feed real quickly. I don't have to take the pen apart. So in that respect, it's an okay pairing, but you can see I haven't written the pen dry. I used a syringe to take the remainder of the ink out, and I've placed it in my next pen. I'll show that in just a minute, but I want to go ahead and see if I can do a writing sample. Okay, and that's not the ink being dry. This is just because I used the last little drip of ink in the feed to do this writing sample. So you can see on this first line, it wasn't horrible. If you like powder blue, it was an okay writing experience, just not my favorite. I believe it was a writing guy who posted something on Instagram recently asking people about the Pilot Petite one, what their experience has been with it or how they liked it. And I thought that might be a good pen to try this ink in. So I had an empty cartridge, and I just used the syringe to take it out of the TWSBI, take the ink out of the TWSBI and put it in this cartridge. And it was kind of stuck here in the back. I really had to give it a tap to get it to start soaking through the feed. In fact, the feed on these little Pilot Petite ones is a little, I guess you would call it a fiber feed. It's a white feed that wicks the ink through it. And once it took a little work to get the ink fed through, but after that, and once I got the ink to where it was down making contact with the feed, you can see it's not getting stuck in the back anymore. I haven't had any trouble, and it's been more enjoyable to use with this pen. So let me do a writing sample with it. It doesn't look that much wetter just from the ink smear, but it is quite a bit wetter, and the nib is well tuned for this ink, and it just writes really nice. These Pilot Petite ones have the same nib that is on the Pilot Varsity. That's the pen that drew my sister into fountain pens, and they just write perfectly every time. I've had no trouble with hard starts or writing dry. Just really nice. And they come in a variety of colors, and they're super inexpensive. I think they're around $3, maybe even less than that in some cases. The only downside is they don't fit a converter, or there's not a converter that fits them, but you can refill empty cartridges or you can eyedropper fill them. Another pen I've really enjoyed using recently is my Lamy CP1 with a bright pink ink in it. I've been using Noodler's Cactus Fruit Eel, and I just love it. It is so saturated and just such a pleasure to use. But I was using it to do some little meal planning for the holidays, and I noticed that the ink was just not drying. I was writing in my Kokyo Jibun Techo, and it has a smooth paper in it similar to this paper in my Hobonichi Weeks. This is Tomoe River paper. I don't think it's Tomoe River paper in the Jibun Techo, but it's a real smooth fountain pen friendly paper, and the ink was just not drying. I was having to use a blotter paper. I know the Cactus Fruit Eel, maybe, I think it was one of the Noodler's inks that I noticed having a longer than normal dry time, but after it's been in my pen for a while and kind of gotten even more saturated, I'm down to just the last little bit. It's just not wanting to dry at all. So I'm going to go ahead and do a writing sample with it, and when I'm done with all my other writing samples, I'll check it to see if it has dried. Okay, that's checking it immediately. I'll do another X in a second, and I'll leave it. Okay, I'll check that X later. I've really enjoyed this pen and ink combination so much, but it's about time to clean this one out since the ink has gotten so saturated and not wanting to dry. I guess I could, I don't know, there's not that much ink left. I could probably put just a half a drop of water in the converter and really extend the life of the ink in this pen, but there's another pen and ink combination I'm wanting to give a try. Now my Platinum Preppy with the Pilot Iroshizuku Momiji, I've been using it quite a bit, but not for lengthy writing sessions. Like when my daughter was home, we were playing cards at the dining room table, and I brought this pen and ink down to use. And this is my oldest daughter, who is even less into pens and writing than my youngest daughter. This pen really caught her eye, and I let her write with it, but I haven't been using this pen and ink combo, but I still had almost an entire cartridge full of ink, and these platinum cartridges hold quite a bit. But I got a new pen for Christmas that I wanted to use a pink ink in, and so I syringed some of the ink out of this Preppy and put it in my Pilot Lucina. I got this for Christmas. We had Christmas early since my daughter was in. Now, I wanted a yellow pen with a broad nib, but the Pilot Lucina, the only option you have for a broad nib is the black pen. So I actually bought two of them. I bought a black with a broad nib, and I bought this yellow one with a fine nib. And one of the good things about them all having black sections is if you want to swap nibs, you don't have to pull the nib and feed. You can just swap the entire section. So a lot of times people like to have matching sections, but there is an upside to having a black section. And I put some Iroshizuku Momiji in this, and this has, like I mentioned, I moved the broad nib over to this one. This is the first Pilot broad nib I've ever had, and I love it. It's nice and wet, and the reverse writing is just slightly scratchy. I can tell that it's something that I could correct with just a little bit of micro mesh, but the reverse writing is a nice, I would call that a Pilot fine, maybe between a fine and an extra fine. Very usable if you're needing to write in a small space. And I just like the look of this pinkish red with this yellow. Now the yellow isn't as bright as I thought it was going to be just by looking at it on pictures on the computer. It's a little more golden, not quite as bright, but I like how it pairs with a nice bright pink ink. Now I mentioned that my oldest daughter liked the look of this pink pen, this pink Preppy, and I let her write with it. And I ended up getting her a Platinum Shooting Star. It was a special edition. It was Harry Potter Hufflepuff, and she loved it. I was kind of afraid that she would be, a fountain pen. Thanks, Mom. But she told me after I gave her the Platinum Shooting Star that she's been trying to write a little bit every day. She works at an animal shelter, and everything they do there is on the computer. She doesn't really do any writing in her personal life. She did bullet journaling a little bit while during the pandemic while she was unemployed, but once work started back, bullet journaling wasn't something that she could maintain. But she mentioned that she's noticed that her handwriting has started to deteriorate. And so she's trying to do just a little writing every day. And she was excited about getting the Hufflepuff fountain pen. She said that was perfect. So I was happy to hear that. And finally, I'm going to do one more writing sample with my Bexley sleeve filler. I've got it filled with Colorverse Dark Energy, one of my favorite inks. And that color matches nicely with the resin in this pen, but I haven't used it for several days, so I'm curious to see how bad the hard start's going to be. It has an 18 karat stub nib. Okay, this is one of the more severe hard starts. I'm going to just prime the feed just a little bit. I'm just barely mashing on the pressure bar. Now just the time it takes for me to screw the sleeve closed may cause it to dry out again. It is pretty dry. I can see it the ink kind of crusting up around the nib slit. Well, let me see. This time I won't screw it closed. I'll just start writing. Let me try a paper towel here. I'm pressing on the bar, the pressure bar. Maybe I have less ink in here than I thought. I thought I still had quite a bit more. I suppose it looks like it needs to be refilled. I don't think I'm going to refill it with Dark Energy. I'm going to try another ink, probably Diamine Green Black. All right, I was a little surprised at how well the Pilot Petite 1 worked with this finicky Ink Studio ink, but I'm really happy because I've been using the TWSBI at Sunday school with 6th and 7th and 8th graders, and they love this TWSBI. They ask to borrow it from me all the time. I've been letting them try it out, but I have to admit, it did make me a little bit nervous. A Pilot Petite 1 is a pen that I've gifted to kids in that age range before, and I'm a little more at ease letting them borrow one of these than my TWSBI. I've enjoyed using the CP1 so much, and this is another pen that I've let kids use. I've let second graders use this one, and with this steel nib, I'm not as worried about them overflexing the tines. They tend to write, kids at that age tend to write with quite a bit of pressure, and I haven't had any issues. I forgot to go back and check the Lamy CP1 writing sample to see if the Noodler's cactus fruit eel had dried. I discovered by accident that it had not. Yeah, it still smears. So I think we've reached the point where it never dries. Usually when I finish a fill with a pen and ink combination, I'm excited to go on to the next one. And I am. I'm excited about using my new Lucina, but I'm also excited about the next time I get to use the CP1. I still have just a little bit of ink left in this Platinum Preppy, and this will probably last quite a while. I use it for little to-do lists and just quick notes, but I've never had any trouble with hard starts or issues with ink flow. So I'm excited to hear my daughter's experience with her new Platinum Shooting Star. The more I think about it, I may not refill my Bexley immediately. I'll probably clean it out and use my new Lucina for journaling. I'm really pleased with that broad Pilot nib. I had considered originally maybe getting a custom grind on this broad nib, but I don't know. I'm going to use it for a while. I'm really enjoying my initial experience. And I want to give a quick update on Monteverde Fire Opal. 24 hours after I did the writing samples, the Pilot Extra Fine and Fine steel nibs had a crust of dried ink starting to form. I feel like the larger nibs would have also if they had been attached to a converter full of ink. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.